All right. Okay, so before I introduce our speaker, I would like to give everyone the 3 meeting ground rule. Number 1, for better seminar experience, please mute your mic and turn off the video throughout all seminar. 2, if you have a question during the seminar, please feel free to post your question in the chat room, either publicly to everyone or privately to the meeting host, me, Stephanie. Okay, so we will address the question when time is appropriate. Number 3, after presentation ended, we have a 10 minutes Q&A, and you can turn on your mic to talk to the speaker, Justin, about your question during the Q&A section. So now I am going to introduce our speaker, Justin Strong. So IT, Tommy, could you please bring the Justin to the spotlight view, please? Okay, great. I see you now. Hi, Justin. So this is the moment we are waiting for. Can you say hi so I can?
Hi, Stephanie. How you doing?
Good. Yeah. So Justin, I'd like to introduce you first. Justin is a good friend of mine. We met each other about 6 years ago in Toastmaster Club, and this is a public speaking club. He is my speech mentor. Okay. So Justin is a product manager and the instructor of the presentation skill at Western Digital. He has over 30 years of custom presentation experience, and his classes are the most popular at Western Digital with a year-long waiting list. Wow, you have to wait 1 year to talk to him, okay? And he's very passionate at data visualization, teaching, and presenting. He's currently the president of Toastmaster Club in Western Digital. And I am currently the vice president at the same club. I'm waiting for our club president, Justin, to retire so I can advance to president his position. So when are you going to retire, Justin? All right.
Oh, yeah, no, good question, Stephanie. Actually, you can probably take over almost any time.
Yeah, okay, everybody is the evidence here. All right, so without further ado, let's give a hand to our speaker, Justin Strong.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm going to share my screen and let me know when you can see it and we will get started.
Okay, we can see that.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending and giving me this opportunity to share with you. As hopefully you can tell, I am really passionate about presentation skills and about teaching also. I'm also very passionate about this particular topic because I believe it will help you in your careers, it will help you in your business, and will help you to serve others more effectively and overall be more valuable. As Stephanie mentioned, I've been doing presentations for 30 years, but it's really been the last 3 or 4 years that I've focused on presentation skills. I decided at Western Digital to add to my career, and I spent about 400 hours personally just writing a class on presentation skills. And then I went to the HR department at Western Digital and asked them if they were interested. I put a lot of effort without a commitment from the company to do that. Well, they said I could do a pilot, and we did a pilot and it was successful. And so now I've been teaching the class for over 2.5 years. And as Stephanie mentioned, there's a over a year-long waiting list to get into the class. So I really believed that presentation skills will make you more valuable in your career. In fact, Warren Buffett, hopefully most of you have heard of Warren Buffett, arguably one of the most successful investors in history. He said that you can increase your value by taking and increasing your presentation skills. In fact, he has a single certificate on his wall, and it is not his business degree. It is a class from a class that he took at the beginning of his career from Dale Carnegie on presentation skills. Now, even though presentation skills are really important, it's estimated that there are over 30 million presentations done every single day. Unfortunately, all that happens during a lot of those presentations is that the presenter convinces the attendees that they had they wish they had never attended the presentation in the first place. Well, I'm going to help you to make your presentations much more engaging. The last time I spoke on one of the three main areas of presentation skills. So number one is your content. Number two is your slides or graphics. And number three is your delivery, how you actually deliver that. Well, today I'm going to talk about the second area, and that's your slides. Now, good visuals do matter in a presentation. There was a company who specialized in large construction projects. In fact, in their industry, it wasn't unusual to have a construction project that was worth over $1 billion. Now, this company wanted to increase their share in the market. And so they had several efforts to help them to increase their share. And they were going after a project that was worth $875 million. Now, the marketing manager made a presentation to the executives and said, we need to change and simplify our collateral, what we present to customers. And specifically, I want to change our presentation because we have this deal coming up worth $875 million. And I think these changes will make us much more effective and able to communicate much more effectively to our customer. The executives pushed back. They said, no, we can't simplify. We need to include all of the technical details of all of the projects that we have done. That's our competitive advantage. Well, the marketing manager was actually convincing the executives. And some of the changes that they made to the presentation were very dramatic. And it caused some of the executives actually to worry a little bit. So for example, the number of slides in their presentation went from 72 down to, on one of the slides, the number of words went from 200 to 10. Here's an example of one of the slides that was the new updated slide. They had a picture of the moon, as you can see here, with the one number 240,000. Now, the distance from the Earth to the moon is 240,000 miles. And so they said, we have laid enough pipeline in our projects to go from the Earth to the moon. Well, the result is that the company was actually successful in their bid. They won the project worth $875 million. Now, you may say, well, you know what, that was due to their expertise, their history in projects like this, or maybe it was a good salesperson, or maybe it was their pricing. So the marketing manager went back to the customer and asked them, why did you choose us? The customer came back and replied, your presentation was different. It made us see the possibilities in both your company and our partnership. So in a presentation, good visuals do matter. But we have a problem in our industry, and we call it death by PowerPoint. Now, people use that term and they laugh, but we all do it to each other. We have these long PowerPoint presentations just filled with data and information, and it almost puts us to sleep. And people wish that they would have better presentations and don't really understand sometimes why they're even attending. Well, I'm going to help you and show you how you can be different and much more effective in your presentations. One thing to keep in mind is that you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you cannot persuade others, it doesn't matter. So I want to open this up right now, and I want you to enter some things in the chat window. I want you to think about your latest presentation or presentations that you've had before, and I want you to enter in the chat window some of the challenges that you face when preparing slides for a presentation. What are some of the things that you find difficult when preparing slides for a presentation? So go ahead and just enter whatever comes to mind in the chat window. Okay, distilling down the words into bullet points. That's absolutely a difficult one. Showing financial data, that's great. Finding good templates and graphics, we'll talk about that. Having good ideas, finding the right graphics. The amount of information, that's one of the biggest ones that I see. Having too many slides and the trouble to reduce them. Cultural differences, sorting out the information, too much information, animations. It's hard to decide what to include and what not to include. Too much information, too much content to include, and the amount of words on each slide. These are all very valid concerns, and we're going to talk about, I think, almost all of these in today's presentation. So let's dive into this. Today, I'm going to talk about 7 techniques and tips that you can do to produce more effective slides. Number 1, simplicity. By far, this is the biggest problem that I see in slides when I view presentations. Now, I work for a very technical company, Western Digital. We produce flash memory. We produce hard drives also. If there's a technology company, we are probably one of the best examples of a technically focused technology company. And I see on a lot of presentations that the presentations are just too complicated, that they have too much information on each slide, and there's no way that the audience can view and understand all of that information and take it in. So one of the things that is one of the most fundamental principles I'll talk about today is slide simplicity. Now, of course, that's easier said than done, but we will talk about how to achieve that. A famous French author who wrote the book, The Little Prince or Petit Prince, he said, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing more to take away. And I think that's appropriate for our presentations. So that's the first principle. Number 2 is that you are the focus of the presentation, not your slides. Now, I'm going to be talking about how to optimize your slides and do your slides well, but one of the things to keep in mind is that you are the focus of the presentation, not your slides. And your slides are there to complement what you say. People can read slides on their own. So if people can read slides on their own, then why are you there as the presenter? Well, you are there to present, and you are the face of your presentation. And again, your slides should complement, not duplicate what you say. Let me give you an example of that. So I think most of you have heard of the company Airbnb. That's a company that allows people to rent out their room or their home to other people. Now, the founders of Airbnb, it was an interesting story how it got started. The founders of Airbnb, there were 2 guys, and they lived in an apartment together in San Francisco. And one month, their rent went up by 50%. They didn't have enough money that month to pay the rent. So they're wondering what they could do. Well, they determined that they heard that there was a conference in San Francisco, and the conference had too many attendees, and there wasn't enough hotel rooms for all of the attendees. So they had an idea. What if we put in our apartment and allowed some conference attendees to stay in our apartment, and we provided breakfast? That's how they came up with the name Airbnb, or Air, Bed, and Breakfast. Well, they were ultimately successful, and they said, well, hey, what if we could do this as a business? And that's how Airbnb started. Now, here is a slide. It looks perfectly fine. It's got some text on it, but it's basically duplicated what I said as the presenter. Now, you can create a slide, though, that will complement what you say. And here's an example of that. So if I put a slide here that shows an apartment and has arrows on where to put their air mattresses, this gives the audience a visual now. And so while the audience has a visual of an apartment, they might have put air beds, and this is complementing what you're saying as a presenter, not duplicating. Now, you might have a question though, and I've heard this before. Well, what about the people who only get the slides? So if you're somebody who maybe couldn't attend the presentation and you get this slide with a bunch of arrows and an apartment, you probably have no clue what this is about. You have no clue that it's about Airbnb and how they started. Well, one solution to that is to, in your PowerPoint presentation, you include two slides. You include the slide with the explanation and the slide with the graphic. But in your presentation, you hide the slide with the explanation. Now, of course, you can do that in the speaker notes, but not everybody accesses the speaker notes. And so it may be easier to put it into a slide that you hide. And so people don't see it in your presentation, but when you send out the slides, people will see it because that slide is there. It's just hidden when you present. So that's one solution to having a set of slides, one set of slides that everybody can look at, regardless of whether they attended the presentation or not. Okay, number 3, ensure that you only have one message per. This is important because when you have multiple messages per slide, people start focusing on one message and then bounce to the next one and then maybe to the next one. And you're saying something at the same time and your audience is thinking another thing. And it can be very difficult for your audience to focus. This is a real problem. And an example of that for real life is, let's say that you're about to board your airplane. And so you look at your airplane ticket and you look at your seat number, whether it's a paper ticket or on your phone, and you look at your seat number and you go, 54B, got it. But do you really have it? Well, you go into the terminal and you continue to wait, and then they're announcing, okay, we're boarding. And you go, what was my seat number? Okay, you look at your phone again, 54B, got it. Then you get up to the ticket counter and you're getting ready to get on the plane and they're looking at your checking your ticket. You look at your ticket again, 54B, got it. And then you get on the plane and you're about to determine, okay, do I go down this aisle or this aisle? You look at your ticket again, 54B. And then when you get to your seat, one last check. Okay, 54B, yes, 54B. On average, you will look at your ticket 6 times before you actually get into your seat. So our working memory is actually very small. And you do have a separate work for PowerPoint presentations and looking at your ticket number. They're both the same thing. So we need to keep our slides to a single message to ensure our audience is focused on what we want to present to them. So here's an example of that. Okay, so let's say that you're somebody from HR and you've got the results of the employee benefits survey that you're presenting to the rest of the people in HR. And you say 70% of, there's 2 issues that you've been able to find, two of the biggest issues. One was that 70% of employees were not satisfied with the emergency family leave program. And there you've got some details on that. The other one was 80% of employees would prefer additional benefits over a pay increase. And specifically, they want longer vacation, more vacation time. Now here we've got 2 messages here, and they are separate. So one way to address that is to put them on separate slides. So here we can talk specifically about the emergency family leave program. And now here, because we put it on a single slide, now we have more room to highlight the 70%. We also have room to put a nice graphic on there so that people get kind of a visual. And then we can pull in the information and details as we get into those details. And then we have a separate slide for employees who would prefer additional benefits over higher pay. That is, they want more vacation time and more flexibility taking vacations. So ensure that on your slides, you keep your slides to a single message per slide. The next way that you can simplify your slides is to keep your slides to 6 points or less. Now, you may be asking me, why 6? Well, I'm going to do a little experiment with everybody. Now, in the next slide, I'm going to put up a set of circles, just a bunch of circles on the slide. And all I want you to do is count the number of circles that you see on the slide. Okay, ready? Here it is. Just count the number of circles. Okay, done. If you're like most people, you counted 10 circles and it took you about 10 seconds to count those circles. Okay, now I'm going to put up another slide with a set of circles, and I want you to do the same thing. Just count the number of circles on the slide. Okay, ready? Go. So this probably took you less time. If you're average, it took you about 1.2 seconds to count the number of circles on this slide. 7 circles, 1.2 seconds. One last slide. Same thing, there's a set of circles there. I want you to count the number of circles on this slide. Wow. My guess is that that was instantaneous almost. And if you're like most people, it took you about 0.2 seconds to count the number of circles on the slide. And in fact, you probably didn't even have to count. You just saw the number 5, and you didn't even have to worry about counting. There is a fundamental difference in 7 and 5. Your brain tries to reduce the amount of effort it takes to process information, because your brain actually consumes quite a bit of energy. So if it can find shortcuts and if it can reduce the amount of effort it takes to process information, it will. So when you put more than 5 or 6 elements on a slide, so I'll give you an example. When your brain sees this, it goes, oh, so many elements. And although you're probably not counting, your brain just looks at this and goes, oh. Now, compare that to this. When your brain looks at this, it just goes, ah, because it doesn't even have to count. It looks at this and go, oh, that's easy. I can process this. So the number, the optimal number, or the number that you shouldn't go above, is 6. Keep it to 5 if you can, but keep it to less than 6, because people's brain will react differently when they see that many number of elements on a slide compared to this many elements on a slide. Now, you may be wondering, well, Justin, compared to your, if you take your last thing that you spoke about, and that's one theme or message per slide, and then this one where you have less than 6 elements, doesn't that mean that I'm going to have a lot more slides? And the answer is yes. You understood me correctly. You will have more slides in your presentation. But I want to tell you, in presentations, the problem has never been the number of slides in your presentation. The problem has always been what you put on those slides. Don't worry if your slides have a lot more, presentation has a lot more slides on it, because that is not a problem. Okay, keep your points on your slide to 6 points or less. All right, let's talk about number 5. People cannot read and listen at the same time. So how does this apply to our presentations? Well, here's an example. So this is a bit of an eye chart, I think you might say, and actually I have a way to actually help process this information later on in the presentation. But let's just say that sometimes when you give very technical presentations, you do need to put a lot of information on a single slide, because the information may be related to each other, and not including that information will not be as effective. So I'm in a lot of different technical presentations in my company, and I see a lot of presentations where most of the slides could be simplified, but sometimes you do need to provide a lot of information on a slide. So when you do provide a lot of information on the slide, what you want to make sure is that if it's a lot of information that people need to look at and consume, sometimes what you need to do is just stop talking and let the audience process the information. Because, as I mentioned, people cannot read and listen to you at the same time. They'll either read what's on the screen and then they're not paying attention to you, or they'll pay attention to you and they won't see what's on the screen or process what's on the screen. So give your audience, if you've got some complicated information, give your audience time to process it, and just stop talking. Let them process. Say, I'm going to stop talking for a while and give you an opportunity to process information. Now, you may want to highlight certain points. And again, later on in the presentation, I'm going to give you some pointers and some tips on how to guide your audience when you have complicated information. So that's the tip number 5. People cannot listen and read at the same time. So give your audience an opportunity to do both by stopping talking, letting your audience read what's on the screen, and then continue once you think that they've had enough time. Now, the next topic and the next tip that I'm going to talk about is probably the most controversial, but hopefully I'm going to be able to make my case effectively. Do not use bullet points. You heard me correctly. Do not use bullet points. About 2.5 years ago, I stopped using bullet points, and I have never felt I have had a need to use them since. What was the reason I stopped using points? Well, one of my presentation idols and heroes is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was the consummate product manager. I thought, yes, he was CEO of his company, but he was a great product manager, and he did not use any bullet points in any of his presentations. So if he didn't have to, I don't think you have to either. So let me make my case for that. Okay, here's some alternatives to using bullets. So you could use shapes. So convert your bullet points into shapes. Here's another alternative to bullets. You could use icons instead of bullets. Here's another one. You could put people and then have them holding up these cards and put your bullets, your words inside of there. Here's another example. You've got bullet points and just very subtly put dividers in between them. You can use white space, and that's just as effective, meaning nothing in between. But if you want some divider, you can do that. You can put it on the opposite side of your graphic or at the bottom. Any one of these is just as effective. And when you include variety in your presentation, people will pay attention more, because when there's something different, people tend to pay attention. Here's another example. So these are this is a numbered list. So now what I've done is I've taken the numbers, and if you look, it may be hard to see for some of you, but they've got very subtle numbers on top of each one of these points. And then I've put the title on each one and then the details below. Here's another example. This is a set of bullets on the extract, transform, and load process for databases. And again, I've got some titles at the top and white space to delineate the points, and I don't need to use bullet points at all. Well, hopefully I've made a case for not using bullet points. This is not a hard and fast rule, so if you really feel you need to use it, go ahead, but I think there is no reason to use bullet points in your presentation, and you can be just as effective, in fact, more without them. So the last item is to guide your audience's focus. So again, you may be presenting complicated information. Well, how do you guide your audience to pay attention to what you want to? You're like a tour guide. And the number one rule of a tour guide is never lose a tourist. So you never want to lose your audience. So sometimes you need to focus your audience's attention. So Stephanie, how are we doing on time?
I think that you can have 10 minutes.
Is it 10 minutes? Okay. All right. Thanks.
5 to 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. Let's say that you're in a restaurant with a good friend of yours, and you're having a great conversation. Now, what you see behind your friend is several different items. Looks like there's a bar there, but there's a television in the corner. And even though the sound may not be on the television, there's a lot of moving objects on that television. I, for one, find it hard a lot of times, even if I'm talking to somebody that I know and love, to not pay attention to a TV that's in the background, because whatever's on a TV is designed to get your attention. So you need to be able to focus your audience's attention, because if you don't, and if you've got complicated information, their eyes and their attention may be all over your slide and not necessarily what you want them to pay attention to. So here's some ways to do that. So number one, here's the first example. So this is the simplest, is just to animate in the information one by one. So this is a slide, how to do data visualization. First, you research your topic, obtain your data. Then you determine what your headline is for your data. What is the headline for that particular data? What's the story behind the data? Then you choose your visualization. Do you want to use a bar graph, a chart, a pie chart, whatever it might be? And then lastly, you review your data just to make sure that everything lines up and that it matches your source data, etc. So a very simple process of just animating in each one of these so that you talk to them as you animate them in. And you can do this with individual points. So you talk to point 1, and then point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. And notice there's a little subtle difference here in that when I animate in a new point, it's completely white. The ones that I've already talked about are gray. And again, this just helps your audience a little bit to focus on what the point that you're talking about and not previous points. And this is a feature that's built into PowerPoint in its animation. So you need to know how to access this, but there are several YouTube videos. If you really can't find out how to do it, you can message me or send me an email. I'll point you in the direction of a couple of YouTube videos that explain it very clearly. Okay, here's another one. Here's another example. Now, in this particular example, I'm a researcher and I've researched infant mortality rate of developing countries. But I'm interested in telling a story about different countries. That's United States and South Korea. So if you look in 1990, South Korea is the white line at the top. They had the highest infant mortality rates out of all the countries. The United States had the third highest. Now, as the time progressed, you can see that South Korea's infant mortality rate is coming down significantly, and this is mainly due to their economic development. South Korea increased their economy significantly, and with that, their social policy also supported healthcare. You can see the United States infant mortality rate decreasing, but not as much as South Korea. And then when you come to actually 1998, the two lines cross. United States actually is just slightly higher than South Korea. And over time, South Korea's rate continues to decrease. Well, United States actually for a couple of years actually increased, and South Korea's actually decreased. So finally in about 2018, South Korea's rate was in the bottom third of all of the developed countries, and United States was actually the highest. Now, this is functionality, again, that's built into PowerPoint, where you can animate in parts of a graph, and so that you can tell a story. And you can have your audience pay attention to the time when South Korea was the highest and United States was the third highest. And then you can talk about its decrease and its decline and why that happened, and then the crossover point, and then what happened at the end. And again, you're guiding your audience on what you want them to pay attention to. Okay, one more example. This was the power of compound interest example. And so you want to talk to your audience about, well, if you invest, let's say $10,000 today, what will it in 10, 20, and 30 years? Well, let's say that you want them to really focus on 8% return, the middle one, the middle column, because that's the average return of the stock market over, let's say, the past 100 years. Well, so one way to do that would be to gray out some of the other information. And so it's still, if they look really hard, they can see that, but you then focus on the ones that you want to talk about. And that is for the 8% return, after 10 years, their money almost doubles. After 20 years, it more than doubles again. And after 30 years, that $10,000 has become $93,000. And so you're guiding your audience on what you want them to pay attention to by dimming out the rest of the information and highlighting the information that you want them to pay attention to. And you can do this almost any type of graph that you have, or virtually anything that you have in your presentation. So you want to make sure when you have complicated information, you want to, and a lot of it, you guide your audience on what to pay attention to. Okay, I've got one more bonus tip for you. And so one of the questions that people ask, well, how do I get good graphics, or how do I put good graphics? So these are some sources that are absolutely free, that you can get great looking graphics for your presentation. And I use these all the time. So number one, photos. There's two sites that I go to all of the time, pexels.com and pixabay.com. These have free to use. What they usually is some type of attribution, meaning you just say, hey, I got this from Pixels or Pixabay or whoever submitted the picture. But almost all their photos are completely free for valid use, right? You use them for any legal use. Now, to get illustrations like the one shown here, there's a site called vecteezy.com. And the nice thing about these illustrations that you can put them into your favorite Illustrator program, and you can change things on them. So for example, here, people have masks. Well, if you wanted to, you could remove the masks, or you could change the color of everybody's shirts or the background color. And so that's one nice thing about some of these illustrations, is that you can do that. And you can do that actually in PowerPoint. You don't need to use a photo editing program. You can do it right in PowerPoint. Now you do have to convert from one to another. Now icons. You've seen in my presentation that I've used some icons. There's a website called thenounproject.com, and that has literally millions, I think it's 3 million icons that they're free to use. And so when you have resources like this available to you, there is no use for putting cheesy clip art like these in your presentation. Please, if you work for a modern company, please don't use clip art like this that belongs in maybe like a teenager's presentation on something, but doesn't belong in a corporate presentation. One last thing, these are guidelines. Break the rules if you have a good reason to, but if you can, keep to these guidelines in much all the presentations that you present. All right, well, that is the end of my formal presentation. I would like to open it up for Q&A. Just before I open it up for Q&A though, I just want to review what we've talked about. Okay, number one. So the first message was keeping your slides what? Simple. Number two, how many messages per slide?
One.
One. Number three, who is the focus of the presentation?
You.
You as the presenter, correct. Number four, how many points per slide?
6.
No more than 6. So your audience cannot read and listen at the same time. And do not include bullets in your presentation. And number 7, the focus, you need to guide your audience's focus when you have complicated information in your presentation. Okay, so I'd like to open it up for Q&A. Just one more point before that. I do teach classes on this material. So if you think that this might be valuable for your company or just any other group that you might have, there are 2-day classes. And I also provide individualized presentation coaching. I've coached a lot of different people in my company and then in Toastmasters. Reach out to me at justin.strong@sbcglobal.net, and I'd be more than happy to provide information. Okay, let's open it up for Q&A. So you can enter your questions in the chat window. And Stephanie, I believe you can also unmute yourself to ask questions also.
Yeah, everybody, please just turn off your mic. Turn on your mic, okay, in the video to ask the question. I do have one question for you, Justin.
Yes.
First of all, I really thank you that your 7 points to make a presentation. Now I know why my PowerPoint bored everybody to death, because I make so many mistakes. Even including today, the PowerPoint I make, I put a bullet point there, and I put those cheesy icon there, and and I also put lots of wording, and so and I also talk too fast. So thank you for so many reminders that tell me why the reason I put everybody into sleep. So my question is, you bring up a very good point. Is I like your PowerPoint, every slide just so simple, and lots of times you just put the number there, and you make a point is you don't want to put all the wording there, because when people supposed to focus on you, right? You're talking, right? Not the slide. Mm-hmm. And you also point out after you send the people's slide, then you can put the notes. You can send the notes to people. So where did you put the notes? Do you put in a separate slide, or you put the slide?
There are actually a couple of different ways to do that. I mentioned one way, and that is just to put a detailed of your slide in a separate slide and hide the slide in your presentation if you send it out, people will get the details of that slide, but it won't show up in your presentation when you present.
Okay.
So that's one way of doing it. Another way, of course, is to putting the information in the speaker notes. But what happens, I think, is that a lot of times people tend not to look into the speaker notes when they look at a presentation, especially if they're just looking at it casually. Yeah.
Okay. Now
so that's an option, right? That's an option to just hide the slides that have all the details, but just don't show the slide. And when you hide them, they won't show in the presentation. I had a person request to me to show the contact information, so I'm showing it right now.
Okay.
Okay. Stephanie, it looks like there's a few questions in the chat. One was, any guideline for background color choices? Yeah, good question. So a couple of things. One is, you probably have, if you work for a large company or maybe even a smaller company, you probably have a corporate template. And so that may not give you any choice for your background. Now, some corporate templates, they have a dark background and a light background. Now, what do you choose between the two? Well, a lot of times it's personal preference, but one consideration, especially as we go back into the office, is that let's say that your background is white. You have a white background. Now, when you've got that background up against a that's presented on a large screen, that screen is going to be projecting a lot of light, very bright light. What does that mean? It may make it difficult for the audience to see you because you've got this really bright light behind you, and it makes it difficult for your audience to see you. This becomes more pronounced when you're at a conference and they've got a huge screen that's behind you. It may be 10 feet tall. And if that's bright white, people may find it difficult to see you. So that's one of the reasons I do prefer a dark background or a black background, is that if I'm presenting in person with a large screen behind me, the screen will not make it difficult for people to see me. And again, you need to be the star of the presentation. So great question. Okay, Stephanie, let's see. Next question. Can we get the list of the resources that we showed? Yes, absolutely. So again, I will put it up right now so that you can see. Let's see. Let me go to that particular part in the presentation just for a second. So there it is. So these are the list of resources: Pexels.com, Pixabay, Bactizi, and the Noun Project. Okay, I'll leave that up for a few seconds if people want to take a screenshot or copy it down or whatever. Okay, let's look at the next one. Doing presentations live versus YouTube, are there any differences? Yes. So I assume when you say YouTube, it means recorded videos or just online presentations versus live well, actually, maybe the question is some type of recorded presentation versus a live presentation. Yeah, so if you've got a recorded presentation, there is some expectation that people have for a little bit higher quality, because you have the opportunity to be able to do retakes, right? You have the opportunity for, okay, that wasn't right, I need to record that again, right? So there is that little bit of expectation that a recorded presentation will not have any mistakes or errors, and that and so you need to make sure that you get things right, and also that you have more opportunity for editing, putting in nice graphics and things like that. So I think one of the differences is that when you have a YouTube presentation that you record specifically for YouTube, and it's not just a live presentation that you've recorded, that there is a bit higher quality, that there is some expectation that there is a bit higher quality. Now, if you're just talking about a live an in-person presentation versus a online presentation, an online presentation, the big challenge that you have on that, and I have actually separate seminar on this one, but because it's a challenging topic. But the biggest challenge that you have on an online presentation is capturing and retaining your audience's attention, because they have lots of distractions. Most of the meetings that I'm in work are online, and so people most of the time mute themselves and don't turn their camera on. So you don't know what the people can be doing. They could be interacting with their dog. They could be eating and cooking. They could have fallen asleep. They could be doing any number of things. Maybe a spouse came in, or maybe one of their children came in and wants attention. Things that don't happen in the audience or when you're in the office. So what you need to be able to do is keep in mind that you have to capture your audience's attention and recapture that. One of the ways to do that is to have variety in your presentation, because when we see something new, we pay attention to it. So that means more slides, better graphics on your slides, and then also at regular intervals, asking questions. And when you ask questions, you don't just ask, so any questions? No, you can ask questions to specific people, especially when you're in a, Jane, what did you think about that proposal? Or John, do you think that that's going to impact our schedule? So asking specific questions of specific individuals is one way to continue to capture your audience's attention and ensure that they're engaged. There's several other things that you can do also, but one is make sure that your slides are good and that you have more slides, because more variety and more change means people will pay attention more. And then the other is asking specific questions to your audience at regular intervals to ensure that they're engaged. But great question, yes.
Well, Justin, we can take one more question.
Okay.
Since the time is approaching. I think Sunil, do you have a question? I saw you turn on your video.
Yeah, Justin, thank you for a great presentation as always.
Sure,
any one or two books or sources that you might, what I struggle sometimes is I have this idea story. How do I put my 3 or 4 points on the slide? What illustration pictures of what? I know it's your own personal process, but any suggestion, any book on that or anything?
Yeah, so there's a book by Gar Reynolds called Presentation Zen. That's a good resource. And then several books by Nancy Duarte. And so she has several different books. And so I think one of them is called Presentation. I can't remember the title of it, but
no worry, with that name I can find.
She's very easy to find, right? Okay. She has just search for Nancy Duarte presentation book. And I think she has 4 or 5 different books, but definitely one great resource. Personally, I attend 2 presentation conferences every year. These conferences are nothing but presentation skills, and I get a lot of information out of those. I'm just going through all of the presentations in the last conference that I attended. I'm about a quarter of the way through all of the presentations, but I literally watch every single presentation at the conference and take notes on every single one. So if you want, I can let you know those, but one is called the Presentation Summit and the other is called Present to Succeed. And the Present to Succeed one, I think the charge was only $50, $60 for the whole thing. It's held in Europe, but they allow you to watch the videos, remotely, of course, and then watch them for months after or years after the conference is done.
Thank you. Very, very helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Sunil.
Right.
Stephanie, are we done? Do we have any more time, or are we pretty much done?
I think we're pretty much done. Is there
Okay.
any last word you want to tell everyone?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to attend and share with you. I'm passionate about this. I love sharing with people things that I've learned, and I love also seeing people make changes to their presentations and become better presenters. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, I posted the information on in the presentation here, and this video will be available on YouTube. It'll be posted there, and so you'll be able to get my contact information. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any additional questions.
All right, thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You make me feel very confident more than ever today. To do
Stephanie, I will stay on the chat for a few minutes.
Sure.
And respond to people's questions, because there's a few more questions on the chat. So
Yeah.
I'll just stay on there and
Okay.
and respond to some of the additional questions that people had.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Sure.
So I just want to tell, also thank the audience today, and please note that the recorder will be passed to audience per request. And by the way, we're going to invite Justin back every 2 months. Next time, we only open to the cloud member who joined the EMBA circle. So please register our EMBA circle and classes from our website. And thank you, our speaker, Justin, and our audience for your attendance. And have a wonderful weekend. God bless all of you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Again, I'll
Thank you,
remain on the
Stephanie.
chat and try to answer any of the questions there. So I'll be here for about 10 or 15 more minutes.
Okay, and please, all the cloud and the CCM, the volunteer, stay here. We're going to take the picture and maybe check a little bit. All right, and thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Bye.